Some stories shake the ground beneath your feet, not because they're sensational, but because they seem too impossible to believe. This is one of those stories. A Hollywood legend, revered for his talent and fierce protection of his privacy, was found dead beside his beloved wife in their sacred home in Santa Fe. The scene was chilling. 2 lifeless bodies in separate rooms, and a third victim, one of their dogs, also dead. On February 26, 2025, the man was Gene Hackman, a 2-time Oscar winner, and the woman was Betsy Arakawa, a former classical pianist and businesswoman. Together, they had shared over 3 decades of life in silence, away from the glare of the cameras. But what if the most tragic part of the story wasn't the loss, but what happened afterward? What if in the days following their deaths, an even darker mystery emerged, one that threatened to redefine everything we thought we knew about the couple and their family in the days after the discovery? Before we begin the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on other fascinating stories. Leave your thoughts in the comments below and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into the story. Law enforcement rushed to uncover what had happened behind the closed doors of the Hackman home. At first, it seemed like an unexpected tragedy. 2 elderly individuals dying at their home just days apart, but that story quickly crumbled. Not only because of the physical evidence found inside the house, but also because of what happened next. A series of court records, emergency motions, and ultimately, a strange and concerning legal move by their only son, Christopher Allen Hackman. Within a week of the discovery, Christopher filed a lawsuit in Santa Fe court to prevent the release of the autopsy reports, death investigation records, and even the photos taken by authorities at the scene. According to legal experts familiar with the case, this move was not only rare, but almost unheard of. Imagine the son of a deceased man and woman not only trying to conceal official records related to their deaths, but actively fighting in court to keep those details hidden from the public. Not only the photos, autopsy reports, investigation notes, toxicology results, and documents, things that in most states and in most cases are made public without question, were withheld. In New Mexico, such efforts require a compelling legal reason. Christopher argued that the couple's privacy and the family's right to grieve should be respected. But others, especially those involved in the investigation, saw something else. An attempt to cover up, a deliberate concealment. What was he trying to hide, and why? The timeline of Betsy Arakawa's death suddenly shifted a few days after investigators had believed she had passed. This is where the story transitions from tragedy to mystery, and from mystery to something even more unsettling. On February 12th, 2 weeks before the bodies were discovered, Arakawa was reported to have called a local medical clinic, speaking with a receptionist. She scheduled an appointment and appeared to still be alive. But according to police logs and initial reports, Arakawa was said to have died on February 11th, 1 day before that phone call. This contradiction brought the case to light. Suddenly, everything changed. How could a dead woman make a phone call? Was the initial death date wrong? Or was someone else trying to impersonate her? The local doctor who received the call confirmed the date and time. The phone records verified that this revelation alone completely changed the story, but that wasn't the only anomaly. Inside the house, authorities found signs suggesting that Hackman and Arakawa had died under very different circumstances, with different causes, in separate rooms, on different days. But still, no notes, no explanations, no signs. Just silent struggle, and now, secrecy. Then came the arrest of Christopher Allen Hackman, long seen as a reclusive and protected figure. He was taken into custody after documents were leaked that conflicted with key points in the family's legal records. While the full nature of the charges remains sealed, early details revealed that investigators were convinced Christopher not only accessed his parents' medical records, but also attempted to block, destroy, or manipulate official documents. Worse still, parts of the autopsy data were leaked, suggesting that one of the deaths may not have been natural at all. This video will take you through the entire story, from the moment Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were found, to the chilling contradictions in the timeline, to the ensuing legal chaos, and finally to the explosive arrest of their son. Along the way, we will examine court documents, expert opinions, and testimony from those involved. We will question the motives behind the moral secrecy of withholding information from the public and the true implications of what happened inside that house. Because this story is not just about death, but about power, legacy, and the desperate actions people take when they fear the truth might be exposed. You'll hear medical experts confused by the timeline, legal professionals shocked by the nature of the court records, and investigative journalists following the clues, uncovering something far darker than anticipated. And perhaps the most haunting of all, you'll begin to understand why this case has caused so much unease. Because even now, with an arrest and a trail of paperwork, the answers are still incomplete. The questions only continue to multiply. Why did Christopher fight so fiercely to prevent the release of his parents' autopsy results? Why did he act to seal not just the images but the full report? What might those documents contain that he didn't want anyone to see? And why were Gene and Betsy found in separate rooms, days apart, in a home that had once been their refuge? As we begin this journey, we are not seeking simple conclusions. We are seeking the truth. And as you will see, the truth in this story may be far more complex than any headline could capture. This wasn't a story of old age and a peaceful passing, but rather a puzzle with missing pieces, wrong starts, and dead ends. But somewhere beneath the dust and silence lies the answer, and it begins right here. Let's begin. It was still dark on the morning of February 26, 2025, when the Santa Fe Sheriff's Department received a welfare check request from a concerned neighbor. The neighbor, who owned property across the mountain slope from the Hackman's home, had noticed something odd in the days before. No lights in the house, no movement, no sign of the morning routine that had been predictable for years, especially from Betsy, who would usually walk one of their 3 dogs at sunrise. The absence in a house that had been a regular presence in the quiet rural neighborhood for decades raised obvious concerns that wouldn't disappear. A neighbor finally called the non-emergency line. That one decision would trigger a chain of events no one could have foreseen. When the police arrived at the property, nestled deep in the cottonwoods of northern New Mexico, they immediately sensed something was wrong. Packages were left at the door, the mailbox was overflowing, a foul smell wafted from beneath a slightly recessed window near the side entrance, and there was no response when they knocked, no sounds from inside. Ultimately, with no other option and possibly a reason on their side, the police broke in. What they found inside was surreal. Gene Hackman, one of the most respected actors of his generation, was discovered dead in his upstairs study. He sat in an old leather chair, his head slightly tilted to one side as if he had simply fallen asleep and never awoke. a book resting on his lap. At first glance, there were no signs of injury or distress. His expression was calm, peaceful, even in his final moments. The police wondered if he had passed away naturally, perhaps while reading a book, undisturbed and at ease. But there was something in the air of the house, the silence, the strangeness, the stillness, that told them this was not an ordinary case. Betsy Arakawa was found 2 rooms away in the master bedroom, under entirely different circumstances. She was lying face down on the floor beside the bed, with no blanket covering her, no pillow under her head. Her body was stiff, indicating she had been dead for several days longer than her husband. There were no obvious injuries, no signs of a struggle, but her death didn't appear peaceful, accidental, or natural. And that was when the case shifted from unusual to deeply troubling. In the hallway between the 2 rooms, one of their 3 dogs, a shepherd mix named Kibbo, was also found dead. The other 2 dogs were missing, and their whereabouts wouldn't be confirmed for several days. The presence of the dead dog, combined with the silence of the others and the lack of any clear explanation, immediately raised questions about toxicology, poison, and neglect. Something was wrong, and the layout of the scene left investigators perplexed. How could both Gene and Betsy have died in the same house, so close to each other, without anyone knowing? Why were they in separate rooms? Why was there no sign of urgency, no distress calls? There were no signs that either of them knew the other was dying or had already passed. Had they been isolated before the incident, or was something else involved? What prevented either of them from reaching out? The sheriff's office was immediately called, along with the medical examiner's office. The 2 bodies were carefully taken for autopsy. The house was sealed, and crime scene technicians meticulously searched every inch, taking photos, collecting samples, and conducting a preliminary assessment. The quiet refuge of a couple who had fiercely protected their privacy was now a sealed crime scene, marked with tape and monitored by deputies within hours. News of Gene Hackman's death had leaked to the media, but what the public didn't know, and wouldn't know for several more days, was that his wife may have died before him. The official press release only stated that Hackman, 95, passed peacefully at home, with no mention of Arakawa, no reference to the dogs, and no details about the strange timeline or the unusual state of the house. The omission wasn't accidental. According to 2 investigators who later spoke anonymously, there was disagreement among officials from the start about how much to reveal and when. Some believed the public had the right to know the full story immediately, especially given Hackman's celebrity status. Others argued for caution, as the details were too vague and the cause of death unclear. Prematurely releasing information could jeopardize the investigation or cause panic in the community. The coroner's office faced pressure to act quickly, but with minimal physical evidence, they began conducting parallel tests on the bodies. Initial findings showed no blunt force trauma, no gunshot wounds, and no clear signs of foul play. But something still didn't feel right. Toxicology screening would take longer, and tissue samples were sent to laboratories statewide, with Tom working against the clock. Meanwhile, law enforcement began reviewing the external footage from Gene and Betsy's property, as Hackman and Betsy had installed a basic surveillance system at their home. The system was primarily used to monitor wildlife and visitors, but strangely, footage from 2 weeks prior was missing. The hard drive had been erased, and the physical DVR device remained intact in the living room, plugged in. but the internal storage had been cleared, serving only as a shell for investigators. This was the first clear sign that someone had tampered with the scene, suggesting that this wasn't just a tragic double death, but likely something much more sinister. The neighbors were interviewed, and no one reported hearing anything unusual. No visitors, no signs of a break-in, no loud arguments or disturbances. The couple was known to be quiet and introverted, keeping to themselves, but even in their isolation, neighbors found it strange that no one had seen Betsy for nearly 2 weeks since the beginning of February, and no one had seen Gene for at least 5 days. When asked why they hadn't reported sooner, most neighbors admitted they assumed the couple had gone on a retreat or were simply avoiding the winter weather. The Hackman family had a habit of disappearing for extended periods, and this time, there was no reason for concern until the forensic team spent over 3 days searching the property. The rooms were cataloged, medications were recorded, every bottle in the kitchen, every container in the garage, every drawer in the bathroom was searched. The computer was seized, and the mobile phone was collected, but once again, a strange detail emerged. Betsy's jeans and phone had both been disconnected. The last activity from both devices was a text message sent from Betsy's phone on February 11th, a simple message to a friend, hoping to meet again. That friend later told reporters that the message seemed generic, unlike Betsy's usual warm and thoughtful texts. It wasn't until a phone call on February 12th to a nearby clinic was discovered that the case truly began to unravel. A receptionist at the clinic confirmed that Betsy had called at 9:15 a.m. She was concerned about chest tightness and requested an appointment for that weekend. She didn't seem disoriented or weak. She was alert, calm, and specific. The appointment was scheduled for February 15th, but Betsy never showed up. A phone call would throw the official timeline into chaos. If Betsy was alive on February 12th, why did investigators believe she died on the 11th? Could the body's date of death have been misrecorded, or were the drill hole or other biological evidence misinterpreted? Or, more alarmingly, was someone using her phone to simulate her presence? Investigators returned to the house and began reconstructing the timeline based on physical clues rather than assumptions. The meal preparation in the kitchen, with a half-used loaf of bread and a plate of wilted vegetables, suggested someone had been active after the 11th. However, dust samples on a nearby bookshelf and a fresh grocery delivery receipt contradicted that timeline. Everything overlapped, conflicted, and grew increasingly nonsensical as they examined the details more closely. Now, the sheriff's department began to suspect that a family member might have entered the house before the bodies were found. Someone with access, someone with motive. When they inquired about who held the spare keys, one name emerged: Christopher Allen Hackman. Gene Hackman was never the type to seek attention, even during the decades when he was one of Hollywood's most sought-after and admired actors. There was always something about him that made him stand out. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, and he didn't immerse himself in the glamour of red carpets or stage media frenzies. Instead, Hackman built a respected career through sheer talent, precision, and a raw emotional presence that audiences could feel in every role he portrayed. He was an artist who vanished into the characters that brought to life figures like Popeye Doyle in The French Connection and Little Bill Daggett in Unforgiven, yet off-screen, he was nearly invisible. Born in San Bernardino, California, in 1930, Eugene Allen Hackman's life was marked by early struggles. His father left when he was 13, and his mother died when he was young. He enlisted in the Marine Corps at 16 by falsifying his age and spent several years traveling the world before considering a career in acting. He was not formally trained, nor did he attend prestigious conservatories. Instead, he built his career slowly and methodically through off-Broadway stages and guest TV roles until Hollywood could no longer ignore him. By the 1970s, he had become one of America's quintessential actors of his time. But even at the peak of his fame, Hackman remained elusive. He rarely granted interviews, refused to be part of the celebrity machine, and never moved to Los Angeles permanently. After his final film role in 2004's Welcome to Mooseport, Hackman completely retired from acting. There were no press tours, no farewell appearances, just a quiet departure. He spent the rest of his life in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with Betsy Arakawa, the woman he met in the 1980s when she worked at a gym he frequented. At that time, Hackman was still recovering from a difficult divorce. His first marriage ended after 3 children and decades of personal and professional pressure. His relationship with Betsy, who was over 30 years younger and had a calmer, simpler personality, contrasted with his own. Friends of the couple described their relationship as stable, even peaceful. Together, they built a home not only in architectural terms but emotionally, creating a space deliberately separated from the chaos of Hollywood where they could maintain privacy and their routines. Betsy Arakawa has her own story, though it is rarely reported. Born in Hawaii in 1959, she was trained as a classical pianist from a young age. Her discipline and artistry earned her recognition early in life, but she never sought fame. After moving to Los Angeles to pursue music, she eventually shifted to business, co-owning a furniture store with a friend and taking on various side jobs to make a living. During that time, she met Gene, a man respected in the industry but weary of its demands. They connected quietly, almost accidentally, and stayed together for the rest of their lives. The couple's home in Santa Fe was a sanctuary, surrounded by cottonwood trees, desert winds, and carefully shielded from public intrusion. They lived with a group of dogs for many years, adopting rescued dogs and integrating them into their daily life. The neighbors only knew them as a polite, quiet couple who occasionally waved but never threw parties or sought attention. Hackman painted in his later years, while Betsy continued to play the piano, usually for herself, sometimes for friends. Their lives were slow, careful, and intensely private. That's why their deaths, under any circumstances, were shocking, especially under these. It wasn't just that they had passed, but the strange, disjointed nature of the events left friends and acquaintances stunned. For decades, the Hackman family managed to live away from scandal, rumors, and extravagance. They fiercely protected their privacy, and that decision shielded them from the public scrutiny that many other high-profile figures face. Even tabloid newspapers left them alone. They became a model for post-Hollywood life, a vision of peace and retirement. But now that carefully guarded privacy has been shattered. 2 bodies in separate rooms, no clear cause of death, an illogical timeline, and a son in custody. Investigators whisper about the inconsistencies, the blocked autopsy reports, and a dog found dead in the hallway. To the world, Gene Hackman is a legend to his fans. He was one of the last giants of Hollywood's golden age, managing to escape the industry's decline with his dignity intact. But inside the walls of the Santa Fe home, those accolades meant little. There, he was simply Gene, a retired actor painting landscapes, walking the dog, tending to a modest garden with his wife, cooking simple meals, and reading history books. To most, he was thought to be cheerful, or at least content. Betsy was the emotional backbone of their home. Despite being decades younger than him, she never viewed their relationship as a transaction. She wasn't someone chasing fame or opportunity. Friends say she admired Gene's intellect more than his celebrity. She enjoyed classical music, yoga, and gardening. She managed the family finances and ensured their life was as grounded as possible. No staff, no housekeepers, just the two of them growing older together in their own way. This raises the question of how everything could have gone so terribly wrong. In such a tightly controlled, peaceful environment, in the days following the discovery of the body, many close to the couple began to reflect on the recent months. Were there any signs of health issues? Did anyone mention depression? Some friends recalled that Betsy seemed more withdrawn lately, especially after a minor surgery at the end of 2024. She had canceled 2 social gatherings in January. Jane, on the other hand, seemed unchanged, certainly older but still sharp and full of her usual dry humor. A friend noted that at the end of February, just days before the news broke, she had texted Betsy to ask about their annual dog rescue fundraising event. The message was never answered. At the time, she assumed Betsy was just busy, but now she wonders if the silence had already begun. Adding another layer of complexity is the role of their son, Christopher Allen Hackman. Although he is not Betsy's biological son, Christopher had spent a lot of time with the couple in Santa Fe, especially in recent years. He is seen by some as distant, while others defend their relationship. Their relationship was never considered warm, but it was consistent. He is the executor of Hackman's will, involved in maintaining the house, and now, with both his parents gone, he is the one filing to block their autopsy reports. Some longtime friends of the couple hesitated to speak on the record, but off-camera they expressed concerns not only about the death, but also the consequences surrounding an old colleague. Hackman simply said, "There's something wrong with this. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Not with Gene Hackman. Not with Betsy Arakawa. After decades of staying out of the public eye, they have now become the center of a media storm and possibly a criminal investigation. Their names, once associated with quiet excellence and deliberate absence, are now entangled in secrets, sealed court records, and unanswered questions." The victims were not just 2 individuals found in separate rooms. The victims were also their legacy, their story, and the truth now obscured by conflicting timelines, legal records, and the increasingly suspicious behavior of their son. They had built a life that should have been lived in peace, but in death, that life shattered. As investigators delved deeper into the days leading up to their deaths, the broken pieces of that story grew darker and more troubling. There was something intentional when authorities first entered the Hackman home on February 26th. They believed they were encountering an unusual but potentially explainable tragedy. The bodies of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, were found in separate rooms, with one of their 3 dogs lying dead nearby. There were no signs of violence, no blood, no signs of forced entry or struggle. The initial conclusion leaned toward natural causes, possibly illness or accidental exposure to some toxin, perhaps a tragic coincidence but not unprecedented. Older couples, especially those with deep emotional bonds, sometimes die a few days apart. This theory seemed plausible until it no longer did. It began to become clear when the Office of the Medical Investigator started reconstructing the sequence of events based on initial physical evidence. According to Betsy's body condition, her estimated time of death was determined to be between February 10th and 11. On the other hand, Gene's death appeared to have occurred more recently, around February 20th to 22. This meant that the couple didn't die together or even within a few days of each other, but rather about a week apart. And during that week, someone had been in the house or deliberately allowed entry. It remained intact, even though Betsy's body had lain undetected in the master bedroom since that time. Nothing about the case appeared typical as investigators began combing through the couple's digital traces, mobile phone records, security logs, internet usage, grocery deliveries, doctor's appointments. They were looking to confirm the exact timeline of when Gene and Betsy last interacted with the outside world. What they found only deepened the mystery. On February 12th, a call was made from the landline of the house to a local clinic in Santa Fe. The call lasted just under 4 minutes, with the receptionist confirming that the voice on the line was calm and coherent. The caller introduced herself as Betsy Arakawa and requested an appointment due to chest pain she had experienced the previous evening. The receptionist scheduled an appointment for her on February 15th, which Betsy accepted. The call was recorded and then quickly forgotten until the investigation began. This detail prompted a significant shift in how investigators approached the case. If Betsy truly died on February 11th, how did she call the clinic the following day? Did she make the call herself, or could someone else have used her name? Was the initial forensic estimate of her time of death incorrect? The timing of the call was verified with the clinic's phone records. No mistakes, no discrepancies. Moreover, the receptionist's statement was clear. She knew Betsy. They had spoken before, and it was her voice on the phone, sounding normal, without any sense of urgency or distress. So what could explain the contradiction? Investigators returned to forensic analysis, reconsidering the physical condition of Betsy's body, which may have been misunderstood. In rare cases, environmental factors, such as room temperature, airflow, and body positioning can cause post-mortem changes to appear earlier or later than they actually occurred. But the discrepancy here was too significant. Days, not hours. Even with a broad margin of error, it didn't align. Adding to the confusion, the delivery records indicated a grocery delivery on February 13th. A local driver had delivered a small order to the Hackman house around midday. The groceries were left at the front door for delivery instructions. When asked, the driver recalled nothing unusual. The order had been prepaid, and no one came to the door, but the groceries were gone when he passed by the house that afternoon. Who brought them inside? If Betsy had been dead since February 11th, and Gene was believed to have passed after February 20th, that left a 9-day gap during which someone else could have been in the house. This began to raise serious concerns. Did Christopher Hackman visit the house during that time? Could he have found Betsy's body and claimed there was nothing amiss? Could he have altered the crime scene in some way to make it appear as though her death occurred earlier than it actually did? Digital forensics revealed that both Gene and Betsy's phones were turned off on February 13th, within hours of the grocery delivery. Prior to that, the phones had been minimally active, but after February 13th there was nothing. No pings, no usage, no location data, almost as if someone had deliberately turned them off or destroyed their connection. Surveillance footage, once thought to be the gold mine of answers, turned out to be another dead end. The home's DVR system had been wiped clean. The device was still operating and plugged in, but its memory had been erased. When forensic technicians examined it further, they found that it had been manually reset using the factory reset protocol. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. This move wasn't accidental, but deliberate. The timeline now looks like this. Betsy was last seen or heard directly on February 12th when she called her clinic. Her body was later found on the 26th, but it's likely she died earlier, possibly as late as the 13th. Gene was believed to have been alive at least until the 20th. The grocery order was delivered on the 13th and disappeared. The phone was turned off that same day. Surveillance footage may have been deleted on or after the 14th, and somewhere in that chain of events, the house became a silent tomb. At this point, investigators turned their attention to Christopher. He hadn't been in regular contact with his father in the weeks leading up to the death. Phone records showed no calls or messages between them after mid-January, but bank records revealed he used a shared household credit account on February 16th, with a $74 transaction logged at a hardware store in Santa Fe, just 10 miles from his parents' home. Investigators cross-referenced store surveillance footage and found a man resembling Christopher entering at 1:43 p.m., purchasing a standard household toolkit, gloves, and a roll of industrial trash bags. The footage was blurry, and the man wore a hat and mask, but the timing couldn't be overlooked. Further analysis revealed another anomaly. The Wi-Fi-enabled thermostat in the Hackman home recorded a sudden drop in temperature on the night of February 13th, from a stable 70 degrees to 58 degrees. System logs indicated the change was made manually through the home's app interface. Investigators subpoenaed IP data and tracked logins to a device registered to Christopher. The pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. They began developing a new theory, one suggesting that the events were not a tragic accident, but a deliberate cover-up. According to this theory, Betsy might have died suddenly, possibly from natural causes or self-inflicted harm. Gene, isolated and overwhelmed, could have passed away a few days later, unable to cope. But this scenario didn't account for the deleted footage, the tampered electronics, or transactions made for cleanup supplies. A more troubling theory began to emerge, that Christopher discovered the crime scene possibly days after Betsy's death, and instead of calling for rescue or notifying authorities, he chose to conceal the fact that he had entered the house, turned off the phone, wiped the DVR, adjusted the thermostat to slow decomposition, and tried to handle the scene himself. But why? Was it to protect his father's legacy, shield the family from scrutiny? Or was there something in the house, something tied to the death, that he didn't want investigators to find? The autopsy results were still pending, but the pressure was mounting. The media increasingly began reporting on an unusual timeline. Journalists raised more probing questions, but the family refused to comment. Christopher hired legal counsel and issued a single public statement through his lawyer. The family requested privacy during this unimaginable time of loss and grief. But privacy in this case quickly gave way to suspicion. Investigators knew that the answers they were seeking lay within the timeline, the exact moments when the phone was turned off, when the thermostat was adjusted, when groceries were brought inside, when the security system was wiped clean. Each action spoke to the familiarity and motive of someone, and the deeper they delved, one name kept appearing in nearly every investigation of the deaths of famous individuals. There is a relatively predictable protocol. Authorities complete their assessments, medical examiners finalize their reports, and after a brief internal review, the autopsy results and case files are made public through official records requests or direct release. This is not just standard practice but a legal matter in many jurisdictions, including New Mexico. These processes are sometimes painful for surviving family members, but they exist to ensure transparency, especially when questions arise about the cause or circumstances of death. However, in the case of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, the process came to a sudden halt, less than a week after their bodies were found and removed from their home in Santa Fe. Their only son, Christopher Allen Hackman, filed an emergency petition. The Santa Fe District Court filed a petition requesting the court to issue an immediate temporary injunction against both the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office and the New Mexico Medical Investigator's Office. His goal was to prevent the public release of any and all images, videos, and documents related to the deaths of his father and stepmother. Such a legal filing raised eyebrows in both the legal and law enforcement communities, not only due to its timing but also its scope. Christopher wasn't simply requesting the sealing of sensitive photos, a request not uncommon in high-profile death cases. He was attempting to block the release of the entire autopsy report, toxicology summary, investigative notes, and even internal communications between agencies. According to legal experts, the scope of the filing was described as extremely aggressive and nearly unprecedented. To understand the legal implications, it's important to note that New Mexico law does not grant families the automatic right to block the release of autopsy results. In fact, the state's law treats these records as public documents with very few exceptions, primarily related to ongoing investigations or cases where release would jeopardize public safety. Without these exceptions, even the families of deceased public figures have very few remedies. This is what made Christopher's legal move so startling. His attorneys argued that releasing the autopsy results, especially photos and video footage, would violate the family's constitutional rights, specifically their 14th Amendment right to privacy and their right to mourn without public intrusion. The filing referenced previous cases, including similar legal efforts by the families of Michael Jackson and Helena Hutchins, where judges had sealed autopsy photos or restricted media access to death scene evidence. However, in those cases, the restrictions were carefully tailored. In this case, Christopher's team had requested the complete sealing of the court records. It quickly became a closely watched topic, with legal analysts beginning to dissect it on national news broadcasts. Commentators questioned the motivation behind such a broad request. If there was nothing suspicious about the deaths, why seek to seal even the non-illustrative sections of the report? Why block toxicology results? Why try to silence findings from licensed medical investigators? Questions were raised, but the answers were not forthcoming. The language of the petition emphasized Gene and Betsy's private lifestyle, stating that the couple had deliberately chosen to live out of the public eye for over 30 years, and that the invasion of privacy after their deaths would violate their long-held values. The document claimed that Gene Hackman did not live for the public and should not be dissected after his death. It also stated that Betsy Arakawa had never sought fame, and that the couple had the right to live peacefully even after death. For many, this argument resonated emotionally. After all, Gene Hackman had built his retirement life around isolation and a deliberate distance from public life. He had turned down countless interviews, rejected publicity, and avoided attention at every opportunity. But even the most sympathetic observers were puzzled by one aspect of the petition. It didn't just request privacy, it demanded silence. It sought to block access to any official findings that could shed light on what really happened inside that house. A specific clause in Section 3B of this motion drew attention. Christopher's attorneys included a line requesting the court to order investigators to disclose or reference any preliminary conclusions, laboratory reports, or timeline data that could infer the cause, manner, or timing of death. They requested the court to prevent even discussing what could have led to the couple's passing. Legal experts quickly pointed out how rare such a request was. A retired judge noted that in her 30 years on the bench, she had never seen a petitioner attempt to block the inference of a time of death. The suggestion that even the sequence of events should be protected raised doubts that the timeline itself could be damaging. The sheriff's office and the medical investigation team responded swiftly in their rebuttal filing. They argued that releasing the autopsy report was not only standard procedure, but also a legal obligation under the state's public records law. They acknowledged the family's desire for privacy, but emphasized that transparency was essential to maintain public trust, especially in a case that had garnered national attention. They went further, arguing that attempts to block the release of basic facts could be seen as obstruction in an ongoing investigation. While they stopped short of accusing Christopher of any wrongdoing, the language of the response hinted at growing frustration among investigators. The phrase "lack of cooperation from the family" appeared multiple times in the records. Meanwhile, local journalists began submitting public records requests in anticipation of the autopsy report's release. When these requests were denied while awaiting the court's decision, several media outlets joined forces to file an amicus brief supporting public access. The New Mexico Press Association, along with several national news organizations, argued that the public interest in the case outweighed the family's right to privacy. They pointed to the unusual circumstances surrounding the deaths, the gaps in the timeline, and the unprecedented nature of the legal effort to keep the case sealed. The summary included an incriminating statement. When public figures die under mysterious circumstances, and their surviving family members try to prevent the release of factual findings, the result is not peace. Doubt creeps in, and public opinion begins to shift. Online forums, social media threads, and news comment sections are flooded with speculation. Is what Christopher is trying to hide to protect his family or himself? Ironically, the court records have attracted more attention to the case than any autopsy report ever could. Under increasing pressure, the judge presiding over the case scheduled an emergency hearing to address the injunction. Both sides were given 3 days to prepare their arguments. The hearing was closed to the public, but leaked information from those familiar with the proceedings revealed it was a heated debate. Christopher's legal team reiterated their constitutional argument, citing psychological harm to surviving family members. The state countered by pointing out that the report was complete and ready for release, and sealing it would undermine the integrity of the entire investigation. As detectives continued to investigate inconsistencies in the timeline, deleted footage, and strange behavior surrounding the days between the deaths, the court's decision became crucial. If the judge sided with Christopher, investigators feared they would be hindered in sharing key findings with the public and possibly even with other agencies. But if the judge ruled in favor of the state, everything that happened inside the Hackman estate would finally be brought to light. But before the judge could make a ruling, another development changed everything. A leak. An anonymous source close to the investigation provided excerpts from the autopsy report. These excerpts were sent to a local journalist who then shared them with national media outlets. Although only partial, the content contradicted many of the implications in the family's legal filings. Toxicology results showed high levels of sedatives in both Gene and Betsy's systems, enough to suggest regular or recent use, though not a fatal dose. The report noted signs consistent with controlled dosage, raising even more questions. The timeline estimates provided in the report also contradicted the initial assumptions presented in Christopher's petition. The leak sparked a media firestorm, making the pending court ruling irrelevant. Information had been made public, the truth was out, and now investigators had even more drive to pursue the case. Leaked excerpts from the autopsy report had just begun circulating, and public interest exploded. A strange yet relatively quiet case, mostly discussed within legal and entertainment circles, suddenly became breaking news across national networks. Talk shows debated the ethics of sealing the autopsy report, while online platforms lit up with speculation, outrage, and curiosity. Within hours, the names Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa became trending on social media, not for their careers or legacy, but because of a mystery that had just turned darker. Details in the leaked report raised concerns for many. High levels of sedatives, signs of controlled substance use, conflicting timeline assessments. These weren't conclusions, but questions disguised as discoveries, and for the public, who had largely respected their privacy in the days following the couple's death, the tone now shifted abruptly. What exactly is Christopher hiding about what happened inside that house? And could the deaths of these two very private individuals not only be surrounded by tragedy, but also manipulated? Or worse? Social media has become the first battleground, where reactions erupted. Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook were flooded with theories. Some users, especially those familiar with true crime forums, immediately analyzed the available information with clinically accurate themes, mapping out inconsistencies in the timeline, suggesting everything from a random poisoning to a deliberate cover-up. Others questioned the role of law enforcement. Was the investigation thorough enough? Why wasn't the public informed about the strange occurrences sooner? Was someone in the sheriff's department involved in keeping everything quiet? Among the loudest voices, could they be Gene Hackman's most dedicated fans? A surprising number of them aren't typical online participants. Many are longtime fans who have followed Hackman's career from the days of the French Connection through his final performance in Welcome to Mooseport. These are the people who remember his late-night TV interviews, watched him accept his Oscar, and saw him gracefully disappear from the public eye. If you find this story interesting and want to learn more, leave a comment with the number 1. If not, leave a comment with the number 0. Now let's continue with this fascinating story. For them, the idea that his legacy is now shrouded in secrecy and controversy feels like a betrayal. Some express sympathy for Christopher, believing he's trying to protect his father's dignity. Others don't forgive him, arguing that hiding information only breeds suspicion. The media began reporting on editorials and commentaries with their own perspectives. A columnist from the Los Angeles Times wrote that the public has a right to know, especially when public figures pass under unclear circumstances. Another columnist from the New York Times took a more cautious approach, questioning the ethics of leaked medical information and warning against rushing to judgment in the media. But perhaps the most impactful piece came from a writer in Santa Fe, who had interviewed Hackman in the early 2000s. In her article, she described the couple's love for their home, their privacy, and their determination to keep their identities hidden. Her conclusion was simple yet sharp. Hackman didn't want to be remembered in this way, and yet here we are, offline. The local community in Santa Fe is struggling with a different reaction, shocked that something so strange, filled with mystery, had happened right among them. Hackman's neighbors, many of whom only spoke to them in passing, were approached by journalists and photographers seeking statements or images. Most declined. A few described the couple as kind, reserved, and devoted to their privacy. The intrusion, some said, felt like a violation. At a local cafe, a laminated sign was posted on the register. No questions about the hackers' thanks for respecting their memory. Meanwhile, investigative reporters continued to push for answers with legal records now made public, and the leak confirmed previously speculated details. The media began pointing out the connection between the inconsistencies in the timeline and Christopher's legal actions. Why would a son, even one deeply grieving, go to such extraordinary lengths to conceal not only the image but the truth? What was it that he feared people might learn? Christopher's silence did nothing to help, aside from his lawyer's initial statement. He declined all interviews, held no press conferences, provided no written responses, and stayed off social media. That communication void became fertile ground for more theories. People began digging into his background, searching for clues that could explain his motives. Some focused on his financial records, while rumors spread that Christopher had long been estranged from his father, and although those reports were never confirmed, they persisted. Some blogs claimed that he had mounting debts possibly linked to a failed business venture in Oregon. Others speculated that inheritance and real estate plans could have played a role. If Gene had excluded him or restricted his access to funds, he might have had a reason to conceal potentially damaging revelations. Still, others speculated that the story was more personal, suggesting there could be family secrets no one wanted to reveal, a history of conflict, a falling out, a fear that the public might judge Gene or Betsy for personal issues unrelated to their deaths. Amidst the growing speculation, a darker story emerged among conspiracy theorists on fringe forums. The narrative took on a new form. Some users suggested foul play, claiming that Christopher was directly involved in the deaths, and that the sedatives found during the autopsy had been deliberately administered. The timing of the phone being turned off and the security footage being deleted wasn't just suspicious, it pointed to guilt. Theories, although unsupported by any confirming evidence, quickly garnered attention. Due to the silence from both law enforcement and the family, it wasn't long before true crime YouTubers and podcasters joined the conversation, tapping into channels with millions of subscribers. They began uploading in-depth analysis videos about the case, complete with animated timelines, reenactments of speculation, and emotional appeals. Some videos went viral, with one popular channel known for its methodical approach to unsolved cases, releasing a 50-minute expose that garnered nearly 4 million views in just 3 days. Its point was clear. Someone had changed the circumstances at the Hackman home, and whoever they were, they had access to knowledge and motive. In the court of public opinion, silence was no longer an option. People wanted answers. They wanted context. And above all, they wanted the truth. Not the version sanitized by the family, but the full picture. Even if it was painful, even if it caused trouble for the Santa Fe Sheriff's Department, this wave of attention had created mounting pressure. Investigators now found themselves tasked not only with solving a complex case, but also with defending their process. Why was the family's request taken so seriously? What had investigators overlooked? Were they influenced by the Hackman name? Several press conferences were held to reassure the public that the investigation remained objective and thorough. In one such conference, a spokesperson for the department stated that while they could not comment on the specifics of the autopsy, they acknowledged the unusual nature of the case and were pursuing all leads with equal diligence. The statement was vague, but it signaled something important. Officials no longer viewed the deaths as entirely natural or accidental. The case had become public and was now considered a possible crime. As public scrutiny grew tighter, calls for transparency intensified, and advocacy groups began pushing for changes to New Mexico's public records laws. One organization, the Media Integrity Center, proposed a new bill aimed at preventing families from blocking autopsy reports without clear harm. Their stance was simple. Transparency protects both the public and the family of the deceased. Concealing the truth, they believed, only fueled conspiracy. In a strange turn, the debate over privacy and access became a nationwide topic of discussion. Television programs featured ethicists, former law enforcement officials, and journalists debating the line between respect and secrecy. When does protecting a family's pain become an obstruction? Is there ever a valid reason to seal an entire autopsy report? And how should authorities address these conflicts when the deceased is a public figure with a long-lasting legacy? In the midst of all this, the memory of Gene Hackman began to shift. Not intentionally, but inevitably. As a new cycle continued to stir his film career, his achievements, his acting, and his legacy began to fade into the background. Instead, a story was being built on silence, mystery, and suspicion for the fans who had admired him for decades. The change was painful for those seeking answers, something unavoidable. However, what remained unchanged was the public's desire to know the truth, not out of morbid curiosity, but to find closure, to restore a story carefully built over decades and then shattered in a matter of days. People wanted to believe that Gene Hackman passed away peacefully in the loving embrace of a home he had carefully built. But the truth does not support that version, and until those truths are fully exposed, the questions will only continue to grow. After the leaked autopsy report, all eyes turned to one person, Christopher Allen Hackman. Until recently, his name was almost unknown outside of close circles in Hollywood or the biographical captions he managed, whether by choice or circumstance, to live in the shadow of a man many regarded as a film giant. Gene Hackman's legacy looms large, but Christopher has kept himself distant from its center. That all changed with a single court record and the ripple effect of a mystery that could no longer remain silent. Who is Christopher Allen Hackman? The question hangs in the air as journalists investigate and the public begins to uncover the figure at the center of a growing storm. What they find is a man of contrasts, contradictions, and increasing controversy. Born in 1960, Christopher is the first of 3 children Gene Hackman had with his first wife, Fa Maltese. By the time he was born, Hackman still had many years ahead before breaking into mainstream cinema. He struggled with odd jobs, took on small roles, and fought to make a name for himself in a notoriously ruthless industry. His dedication to his craft consumed much of his time, and many who knew the family during those years spoke of the toll it took on his marriage and relationship with his children. Christopher's early life was not defined by the glamour of Hollywood, but by the instability in the life of an ambitious artist. The family moved frequently during Christopher's childhood. Hackman's schedule was erratic as he ultimately achieved breakthrough success in the late 1960s with his role in Bonnie and Clyde and his subsequent relationship with the French. The sudden fame only intensified the scrutiny, which, while welcomed in his professional career, brought a harsher gaze on his personal life. Hackman's marriage to Maltese began to deteriorate when Christopher was a teenager. His parents' divorce was finalized in 1986, when Christopher was in his mid-20s. Friends from that time recall a young man caught between resentment and reverence. He admired his father's talent, but felt anger over his father's absence. There had been attempts to connect over the years, with holiday visits and occasional public appearances, but a physical and emotional distance always remained. Unlike many children of actors, Christopher never sought a place in the film industry. He dabbled in photography, then architecture, and later tried a series of business ventures, each with varying levels of success. None of them made headlines, and none lasted into the 1990s. Christopher had almost vanished from the public eye. He settled in Oregon for a time, reportedly running a small design consulting business. He married in the late 1990s, had no children, and lived a quiet, isolated life with those around him. But quiet didn't necessarily mean stable. A court records review revealed at least 2 civil lawsuits filed against him for breach of contract, both of which were settled out of court. In one case, a former client accused Christopher of mismanaging funds for property renovations. The case was never tried, but the documents suggested a man struggling to maintain his projects. There are few public records about Christopher's relationship with Gene. In the 2000s, Hackman retired and rarely mentioned his children in interviews. In a few rare accounts, he spoke of them fondly, but without providing specific details. A 2004 interview with the Denver Post briefly quoted him, "My kids are doing well. I'm proud of what they've become. No names, no details." However, sources close to the family suggest that the relationship between Gene and Christopher had grown closer in the past decade. The move to Santa Fe seemed to offer an opportunity for reconciliation. Christopher visited the house multiple times throughout the year, sometimes during holidays, other times without prior notice. He helped with small repairs, occasionally accompanied his father to doctor's appointments, and began assisting with some real estate plans. He wasn't close with Betsy, according to neighbors, but their relationship was polite. She introduced him as Gene's son, not as my stepson. They were courteous, formal, and mostly kept their distance. That difference became more pronounced in recent years, according to a longtime friend of Betsy, with tension surrounding the family trust. Gene had rewritten portions of his will in 2018 and again in 2021. The details of those amendments were sealed, but the changes were believed to have restructured the distribution of assets in a way that reduced Christopher's control over key properties. Betsy, by then in her 60s, had taken on more responsibilities in managing their joint assets and finances, and she was known to be cautious with spending. It's unclear how this creates a conflict, but the timing coincides with Christopher suddenly stopping his frequent visits in the months leading up to Gene and Betsy's deaths. There were few signs of public conflict, but also very little warmth. Christopher had not visited since early January. He did not respond to holiday cards from his father. A voicemail left by Gene on January 9th asking Christopher to call when he could was never returned. These details, while not inherently suspicious, began to paint a picture that was either tense or indifferent. When news of Gene and Betsy's deaths broke, many expected Christopher to make a statement or appear publicly, yet he did neither. His absence during the initial investigation was particularly notable. It wasn't until 6 days later that Christopher's lawyers filed a request to block the release of the autopsy reports, and by that time, public scrutiny had begun to turn toward him. In the following weeks, more basic details began to emerge. Financial records examined by reporters revealed that Christopher had recently taken out a short-term loan secured by a secondary property in Oregon. The loan had been filed just a month before Gene Hackman's death, listing his name as the guarantor. A strange detail raised red flags. There was an administrative error regarding the forged signature, or perhaps Gene had agreed to support the loan without knowing the broader implications. Investigators have not released their findings on this matter, but court records show that the signature on the guarantor line did not match previously verified samples of Gene's. Handwriting analysts from Hackman's legal team are said to have been called in to assess the documents. While no charges have been immediately filed, the implications are deeply concerning. If Christopher forged his father's signature on a legitimate financial document, it could indicate deeper financial desperation and might also reveal a motive, especially if inheritance or control of property were part of the equation. Then there was the footage from the hardware store, where a man identified as Christopher was seen purchasing gloves and trash bags on February 16th. He was alone, wearing a hat and a face mask. While his identity had not been officially confirmed by the police, sources close to the investigation said the resemblance was striking, and additional surveillance from a nearby gas station seemed to show the same car he was known to drive. Why did he buy those items? What was their purpose? If he had discovered his stepmother's body earlier in the month, why wait to call the authorities? Why purchase items typically associated with cleaning or covering up? Christopher's lawyer declined to comment on the footage, but reiterated that their client had fully cooperated with law enforcement and had not committed any wrongdoing. However, investigators seemed unconvinced, and a search warrant for Christopher's residence in Oregon was issued, with several electronic devices seized. No formal charges were filed at that time, but insiders believed the case was rapidly escalating. Despite the mounting circumstantial evidence, some supporters gathered to defend Christopher. Friends from his Oregon community described him as quiet, even shy. He had volunteered at a local animal rescue, helped an elderly neighbor rebuild a deck, and had once assisted in evacuating residents during a wildfire. These were not the actions of a man preparing to cover up, they argued. Rather, they were the actions of a kind person, though emotionally distant. However, references to his character could only go so far. Investigators pieced together the timeline and reevaluated the autopsy findings, and Christopher's actions, or lack thereof, began to weigh more heavily in the unfolding investigation. The gap between February 11th and February 26th remains unexplained. Why was the house left untouched? Why was no one called? Why was there no official acknowledgement of the deaths until a suspicious neighbor stepped forward? And most importantly, why did Christopher aggressively file to prevent anyone from learning more about the growing cloud of uncertainty surrounding the case? Here is a man whose life was defined by darkness, not by crime, not by scandal, but by absence. He had tried to hide for decades, and now, suddenly, he was the most closely watched person in a case that had captured national attention. Whether he had something to hide or was simply overwhelmed by grief and fear, the truth remained that his actions had drawn attention. And once that attention was focused on him, it wouldn't let go. On the morning of March 10, 2025, just 2 weeks after court records heightened the tension surrounding the deaths of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, Christopher Allen Hackman was arrested by the Santa Fe Sheriff's Department. The arrest marked a significant turning point in a case that had captured the public and media's intense focus, following increasing evidence suggesting that the son of the late actor and pianist might have been more involved in the deaths of his parents than anyone had initially suspected. The arrest was the result of weeks of investigation, during which law enforcement meticulously examined digital traces, financial records, witness testimony, and surveillance footage. While no formal charges had been filed at this point, authorities had built a strong case. Christopher had deliberately altered key details about the deaths and may have played a direct role in the events surrounding them. He was arrested at his home in Oregon. The arrest was quiet, with little fanfare. By the time news outlets reported on it, he had been transferred to a detention facility in Santa Fe, where he was briefly interrogated before being officially charged with obstruction of justice and potentially being involved in the deaths of his parents. The charges related to his attempt to block the autopsy, his suspected role in tampering with evidence, and newly emerging financial motives linked to inheritance, along with his strained relationship with his father, all played a significant role in his arrest. The arrest was a meticulously planned operation, based on a wealth of circumstantial evidence. Investigators focused on Christopher's activities in the days leading up to the death, including his suspicious purchase of cleaning supplies from a local hardware store on February 16th. Security footage from the store showed a man resembling Christopher buying gloves, trash bags, and industrial cleaning supplies. While it's still unclear whether these items were used to clean the Hackman home, their presence raised enough questions to warrant further investigation. His refusal to answer calls from his father in January, along with the complete lack of contact after the death, only fueled further suspicion. Additionally, a forensic audit of Christopher's financial records revealed that he had recently taken out a short-term loan. For a property he owned in Oregon, loan documents listed Gene Hackman as the guarantor, although investigators discovered anomalies in the signature that they believe indicate potential forgery. While this alone was not enough to prove guilt, it added another layer of suspicion to Christopher's activities and his financial motives. Another crucial factor in the arrest was the discovery of digital evidence linking Christopher to the Santa Fe home after his parents' deaths. Mobile phone records showed that on February 13th, 2 days after Betts's body was likely discovered, Christopher's phone had pinged local cell towers near Hackman's residence. This raised further questions about his whereabouts during the critical period between the couple's deaths and the final discovery of their bodies. Furthermore, investigators discovered that Christopher had remotely logged into the house's temperature control system on February 13th, lowering the temperature inside the home. This unusual action aligned with efforts to slow down the decomposition process, but also indicated that Christopher was aware of the bodies and was actively managing the crime scene. While the digital evidence was damning, it was his interference with the security footage that ultimately led to Christopher's arrest. When investigators first examined the surveillance system at the house, they discovered that the DVR had been reset, and all video footage from the week leading up to the discovery of the bodies had been deleted. Further analysis revealed that the system had been manually reset using a specific reset protocol, an action that could only have been performed by someone with access to the house and knowledge of the system. Given that Christopher had a history of visiting the home and was present near the residence on February 13th, law enforcement began to connect the dots with this on-site evidence. The Santa Fe police acted swiftly to secure the arrest warrant. Christopher was taken into custody quickly and without incident. His lawyer, who had previously made public statements asserting his client's innocence, was notified of the arrest just before the news broke. The lawyer, along with some of Christopher's friends, immediately stated that the arrest was based on circumstantial evidence and that Christopher had done nothing wrong. According to Christopher's legal team, the arrest is the result of a misunderstanding and a rushed judgment. They continue to assert that Christopher acted appropriately in protecting his family's privacy during such a difficult time. The decision to file a lawsuit to prevent the release of the autopsy results, they argue, was the action of a son trying to protect the dignity of his parents, not to conceal a crime. His lawyers also point out that Christopher has no history of violent behavior or prior criminal activity, arguing that this suggests the charges are unfounded. Public reaction to Christopher's arrest has been mixed. Some sympathize with him, arguing that he was simply overwhelmed by grief and didn't know how to cope with the loss of his father and stepmother. Others, especially those who have closely followed the case, are less forgiving. They point to the evidence surrounding his finances, the suspicious timing of his legal actions, and his lack of cooperation with investigators as signs that something much deeper is at play. As journalists and commentators speculate about the upcoming trial, some wonder if Christopher's lawyers will argue that he was a victim of circumstances, swept up in a series of strange and unfortunate events that led him to make decisions that seemed far worse than they truly were. Others believe the defense will focus on the lack of concrete evidence directly linking Christopher to the deaths of his parents. Clearly, the case is still ongoing, and there's much more to unfold for Christopher. The arrest was just the beginning. He will remain in custody while his legal team prepares his defense. The bail has been set at a substantial amount, and the trial date is scheduled for the end of the month. For now, Christopher's fate remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. The case has entered a new and dangerous phase. The investigation is no longer just about a sudden couple and mysterious deaths. It has now become a public battle between the Hackman family's legacy and the forces of law, the media, and public opinion seeking the truth. After the arrest, the media frenzy surrounding Christopher Hackman intensified. News outlets scrambled for exclusive interviews with friends, former colleagues, and legal experts. The public's desire to understand Christopher's actions, motives, and the events surrounding the death grew as more and more complicated information emerged. If you found this story surprising and captivating, don't forget to give us a like, share the video, and leave your thoughts in the comments so we know what you think. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other exciting videos. Thank you for watching till the end. Welcome to our channel. Today, we will explore one of the mysteries that has been buzzing in the community. A key witness, Gene Hackman's neighbor, has finally spoken out and shared shocking information that could completely change the direction of the investigation. Stay tuned to uncover secret details, surprising discoveries, and a story full of suspicion about one of the most controversial events in recent times. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any upcoming videos. On February 26, 2025, the sky over Santa Fe, New Mexico, was shrouded in a cold gray hue. The distant mountains were obscured by the mist that covered Sunset Trail, where the mansion of legendary actor Gene Hackman and his wife, pianist Betsy Arakawa, stood. The house, once filled with warmth and lively conversations from neighbors and strolls through the garden, suddenly became eerily silent. The neighbors, who were used to Hackman's regular presence, began to sense that something was wrong. They no longer saw him walking down the familiar road every morning. Betsy's piano no longer echoed through the windy afternoons. Even their golden Labrador dog was no longer running around the yard as it used to. John Miller, who lived about 3 houses away from the Hackman residence, recalled, "Everything was unusually quiet. We hadn't seen them for several days. This isn't like them. They wouldn't just disappear without any notice." The people in the neighborhood knew that Hackman was very private, but he still maintained a routine. Every morning he would stop by a small nearby cafe, read the newspaper, and chat with the staff. But for the past week, his silver Jeep hadn't been parked outside the cafe, and calls from close friends went unanswered. At first, people thought maybe Hackman and his wife were just away on a trip, enjoying the peace and quiet as they often did. But as the days passed, the sense of unease only grew stronger. On the morning of February 26th, John Miller and his wife, Linda, decided to do something they rarely did: knock on the Hackman's door. They stood in front of the dark brown wooden door, rang the doorbell twice, but no one answered. Linda tried peering through the window, but it was pitch dark inside, with no lights or sounds. They turned around, trying to reassure themselves that Gene and Betsy might just be sleeping or away, but the unease inside them continued to grow. Finally, around 1:30 p.m., John called the Santa Fe police to request a welfare check. About 15 minutes later, 2 police cars arrived. The officers got out of their vehicles, observed the house for a moment, then rang the doorbell again, but still no one answered. One of the officers circled around to check the windows, but there was no sign of forced entry. Eventually, they decided to obtain a search warrant, and by 3 o'clock p.m., the police officially broke down the door. Immediately, a damp and cold atmosphere poured out from the large house. Everything was in place, as if time had stopped. Unwashed teacups sat on the table, and a book lay open on the sofa as if someone had just finished reading it. But what sent a chill through the officers was the absolute silence. There were no barking dogs, no footsteps, no signs of life. They split up to check each room, and then one officer shouted, "We found something in the bathroom." The body of Betsy Arakawa was found motionless. The police quickly determined there were no signs of violence or struggle. Her bedroom was tidy, with no evidence of panic or resistance. Not far from the bathroom was the master bedroom, where Gene Hackman was also found in a similar state. On the bedside table was an old photograph of him and his wife, placed neatly as a lingering memory. Their loyal dog, their companion for many years, lay at the foot of the bed as if it had never left. The officers looked at each other, speechless. The silence enveloped them, much like the atmosphere in the house. In recent days, the big question has been, why didn't anyone call the police sooner? Although Gene and Betsy had been missing for several days, why was it only on February 26th that someone finally called the police? Some neighbors admitted they felt something was off, but no one dared to act. They didn't want to invade the couple's privacy, especially since Gene Hackman was known for not wanting to be disturbed. "We thought they were just away, didn't want to make too much of it," another neighbor, Susan Taylor, said with a lump in her throat. But when everything came to light, everyone felt regretful. Could they have done something sooner? If someone had called the police earlier, would things have turned out differently? The news of Gene Hackman's death quickly spread across the United States and the world. Fans expressed their sorrow as they remembered his legendary roles in The French Connection, Unforgiven, Superman, and more. Many close to Gene were also shocked. A former colleague shared, "Gene was one of the greatest, not just as an actor but as a wonderful human being. It's truly heartbreaking." That evening, the Santa Fe police held a press conference confirming that there were no signs of violence and that the investigation was still ongoing. However, one big question remained unanswered. What really happened in that house? And is there something we don't know? The story is far from over, and the answers may lie in further revelations from Gene Hackman's neighbors. If you found this story intriguing and want to stay updated on the latest developments, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons right now. Share this video with your friends so they can explore the mysteries surrounding Gene Hackman and these shocking revelations. To make sure you don't miss any updates, be sure to turn on notifications and leave your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your take on these unexpected twists. Let's uncover these mysteries together. Life in the quiet neighborhood on Old Sunset Trail was always peaceful. But now, as the small details come together, Gene Hackman's neighbors are beginning to realize that there were many signs of something unusual before. 4 signs that no one really paid attention to until it was too late. On February 12, 2025, a call came through to Betsy Arakawa's phone late in the afternoon. According to telecommunication records, the call lasted exactly 47 seconds before it was disconnected. No one knows who made the call, and more importantly, no one on the other end of the line responded. Strangely, according to a source from the investigation, that call wasn't from anyone in Betsy's usual contact list. Not a friend, not a family member, and no one that the police could easily identify. A close friend of Betsy, Linda Carter, recalled that she texted Betsy that day to check in, but never received a reply. That wasn't like her. She always replied, even if it was just a short message. I thought maybe Betsy was busy or resting, but looking back now, I can't help but feel something was wrong. If Betsy really received that call, why didn't she respond to anyone afterward? Gene Hackman's neighbors can't quite remember the last time they saw him. Some people recall it being on February 10th, when he drove home after stopping by a grocery store, while others think they may have seen his figure through a window on February 11th or 12th. However, from that point on, no one is certain about anything anymore. The only thing they clearly remember is a strange detail: the lights in the house. John Miller, who called the police on February 26th, recalled, "We saw the lights flickering. It wasn't normal. It was like someone was turning them on and off randomly." Between February 14th and 17th, several neighbors noticed the lights in Hackman's house flickering at odd hours, sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning. Some even mentioned that once, the lights flickered continuously for several minutes, as if someone was trying to signal something. However, looking from the outside, no one saw any movement inside the house, no silhouettes behind the curtains, and no sounds coming from it. Everything seemed like a spooky play, where the lights were the only indication that something was happening, but no one knew exactly what it was. The Santa Fe police later checked Gene Hackman's phone data and discovered another strange detail. His phone was still receiving signals until February 17th. This meant that Hackman's phone was still operational, still able to receive calls and messages for 5 days after the mysterious call to Betsy. But oddly, no calls were answered, no messages were sent, and there were no signs that anyone had used the phone. A longtime friend of Gene Hackman, David Foster, called him on February 15th. The phone rang, but no one answered. "I thought maybe he was just busy, but something felt off. Gene always called back, he always did." From February 18th onward, Hackman's phone was completely disconnected. This meant there were two possibilities. Either someone had turned off the phone, or the phone was no longer within a signal area. The biggest question is, what really happened in that house over the course of nearly 2 weeks? If Gene and Betsy had passed away before February 26th, why was Hackman's phone still active until February 17th? If someone was in the house between February 14th and 17th, who was turning the lights on and off? And if they needed help, why did no one hear anything? A chilling hypothesis has been suggested. Perhaps someone was in the house with them, or after they were gone. But if there was someone, who were they? And why were there no signs of violence or forced entry? The neighbors began asking questions they had never considered before. Some regretted not calling the police earlier, while others began to feel afraid, wondering if something truly sinister had happened in that house, and whether someone might still be hiding somewhere. As the police continued their investigation, they realized that each new clue made the case even stranger. Who was the person who called Betsy Arakawa on February 12th? Why did Hackman's phone remain active until February 17th, but no one answered? What was the meaning behind the flickering lights in the house? Who was the last person to truly see Hackman and Betsy? These questions remain unanswered, but as the police continue to examine every small detail, one thing is certain. The silence on Old Sunset Trail is no coincidence, and this mystery is far from over. The silence that had taken over Old Sunset Trail was no longer the only thing making residents uneasy. After the police released their preliminary investigation results, one neighbor finally broke the silence, and what they revealed made things even more chilling than before. On March 2, 2025, 5 days after the police discovered the bodies of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, an anonymous witness contacted the authorities. This person lived right next door to Hackman's house, just a few steps away, and they had something they had never told anyone before. "I swear I heard someone inside that house on the night of February 17th. This confession immediately raised a series of new questions. February 17th, 5 days after the mysterious call to Betsy, and the last day Hackman's phone was still active. What happened that night? The neighbor reported that around 1 a.m., while they were watching TV in the living room, a faint sound came through the window. At first, they thought it was just the usual creaks of an old house. But then they heard it again and again. Footsteps, not loud or hurried, but soft and slow, as if someone was moving cautiously inside Hackman's house. It wasn't Gene or Betsy, as they were always quiet at night, but this time it was different. The witness described the sound lasting for hours with occasional pauses, as if someone was standing still midway and then continuing to move. They couldn't see anyone through the window, but they were sure of one thing. Someone was inside the house. The police thoroughly checked Hackman's house, but found no signs of forced entry, no broken windows or damaged locks. So, if someone really was inside the house on the night of February 17th, how did they get in? A disturbing theory was proposed. That person may have been in the house from before. This would mean Hackman and Betsy might have let someone in, but then that person never left. Or perhaps someone entered without anyone noticing, hiding inside the house for days. But if someone was hiding in the house, why did they turn the lights on and off in the middle of the night? Why didn't they take any valuable items? And most importantly, what did they do in that house between February 12th and February 26th? Another big question arises. If they heard strange noises on the night of February 17th, why didn't the witness call the police right then? The witness remained silent for a long time before responding, "I didn't want to believe it, and honestly, I was scared. The truth is, even living in a quiet neighborhood, there was this vague fear creeping in during those nights. Since the lights started flickering oddly, since Gene and Betsy stopped appearing outside as usual, something was off, but we didn't want to think about the worst. If I had called the police earlier, maybe things would be different now. This regret wasn't just felt by the witness, but spread throughout the neighborhood. People realized they had overlooked the strange signs, not paying attention to small changes that might have signaled something far more terrifying. What worries the police the most is another possibility. If someone was in the house on the night of February 17th, they could have left before February 26th without anyone knowing. But who were they, and where did they go? Another chilling theory has emerged. What if that person is still somewhere nearby? The neighbors are becoming more uneasy than ever. Some people no longer feel safe sleeping alone, while others are installing additional security cameras, and everyone shares one common fear. If someone really was in the Hackman house that night, could they return? Instead of the case being resolved, it's becoming even more bizarre. The biggest question still remains unanswered. Who was in that house on the night of February 17th? The deeper the police dug into Gene Hackman's case, the more strange signs they uncovered. It seemed that someone or something had deliberately interfered with the technology systems in the Hackman house before everything fell silent. It wasn't just the mysterious disappearance of the two individuals, but also the erased evidence, altered data, and systems that suddenly malfunctioned with no reasonable explanation. Gene Hackman had a habit of wearing a personal smartwatch that tracked real-time health data. When the police examined the data from his watch, they discovered something strange. The watch recorded Hackman's heart rate as stable until around 11:47 p.m. on February 16th. However, just before the device permanently lost connection, it registered a series of irregular heartbeats. Specifically, around 11:30 p.m., Hackman's heart rate suddenly spiked from 68 beats per minute, his normal resting rate, to nearly 130 beats per minute, as if he were experiencing extreme stress or engaging in intense physical activity. A few minutes later, his heart rate dropped abnormally, fluctuating between 40 to 50 beats per minute before the signal was completely lost at 11:47 p.m. A crucial portion of the data from 10 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. had been deleted or was unretrievable. What does this mean? There are two main hypotheses. The data was either corrupted or deleted by an external agent. Someone might have accessed the device and erased the most critical portion before the police arrived. The smartwatch had been removed before losing connection, possibly by Hackman himself or someone else. But if the data was deleted, who could have done it? And why would they choose to erase the most important time frame? Gene Hackman's house had a modern security camera system with at least 3 main cameras, one at the front door, one in the garage, and one in the backyard. These were smart devices capable of storing footage on the cloud, but there was a problem. The front door camera stopped working around 7:23 p.m. on February 16th, just a few hours before Hackman's heart rate recorded abnormal signs. The police checked the data and discovered that the camera had not recorded any footage after that time. There were no signs of hacking, but the system had automatically disconnected from the server. The backyard camera continued to operate but did not record any motion after 9 p.m. on the same day. So what does this mean? Did someone disable the front door camera before the incident? A technical malfunction is unlikely, as these cameras are regularly maintained. If someone did disable it, how and why would they have done so? And why was only the front door camera affected, while the backyard camera continued to operate for a few more hours? The question arises, Did someone enter the house through the front door without wanting to be recorded? The most suspicious detail was revealed when the police checked Hackman's security system. The family owned an advanced security system directly connected to a private security company, but according to data from this company, Hackman's alarm system had been reconfigured around February 12th, which coincided with the time Betsy received the mysterious phone call. A local technician who had worked with the system revealed a shocking truth. "I don't know who did this, but someone changed the settings. The security logs were erased, and the sensitivity of the alerts was reduced. It's as if someone wanted to ensure the alarm wouldn't go off." No one in the Hackman family had requested this change, and there was no record of a technician coming to perform maintenance. Someone had accessed the system, altered the settings, and ensured that if anyone entered the house in the following days, the alarm would not sound. Looking at all these details, a terrifying picture begins to form. On February 12th, Betsy received an unidentified call. On February 16th, the front door security camera was disabled. That night, Hackman's heart rate showed abnormal signs before the device lost connection. The alarm system had been reconfigured a few days earlier, causing it to fail at a critical moment. Some data from Hackman's heart rate monitor was erased. None of this can be just a coincidence. Someone had planned ahead. Someone had entered the house and ensured no trace was left. But who were they, and what did they want? One thing is certain. They knew exactly what they were doing. As the police continued their investigation of Gene Hackman's mansion, an eerie, unsettling vibe filled the house. What they found didn't resemble the home of a Hollywood icon. Instead, it appeared to have been deserted for weeks. There were no signs of activity, except for 2 tired dogs. The kitchen was filled with rotting food, with some meals untouched, and no evidence that Hackman had eaten in the days leading up to his death. This raised a crucial question. Had he been drained of all energy before he passed away? The forensic report showed that Hackman hadn't eaten in days, with no food found in his stomach. This suggested that he was unable to care for himself in his final days without Arakawa's assistance. Hackman's advanced Alzheimer's disease likely left him disoriented, unable to remember how to call for help, prepare meals, or make sense of his environment. As time passed, the mansion gradually became a dangerous, inescapable trap for him. Another unsettling discovery was that the house's air conditioning system was completely turned off. During the scorching summer months in Santa Fe, temperatures inside the house could easily surpass 95 degrees to 35 degrees C. Without proper ventilation, the air grew thick and oxygen-starved. This oppressive environment may have contributed to Hackman slipping into a coma before he passed away. But why was the air conditioning turned off? Did Hackman forget to turn it on? Did Arakawa turn it off before leaving? Or was there something else at play? An unexplained reason behind it all? The police found no evidence of a power outage, indicating that the system was still functioning properly. Someone had deliberately turned off the air conditioning, but who and why? What unsettled the investigators even more was the lack of any signs of normal daily life. There were no new emails or messages on Hackman's phone, no visitors at the villa for weeks, and no grocery bills or food deliveries for over a month. It seemed as though Hackman had abandoned the villa, or perhaps he had lost the ability to maintain any semblance of normal life. The greatest mystery, however, lay in the basement. One of the officers stumbled upon an old wooden door that wasn't part of the original house's blueprints. Why was it there? When they opened the door, a spiral staircase led down into the darkness. A strange, pungent odor wafted up from below, sending chills down the investigators' spines. As they shone their flashlights down the staircase, a hidden tunnel came into view. What they found inside left them utterly stunned. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were once one of Hollywood's most iconic couples, known for their high-profile connections and widespread fan base. However, when they vanished from their own home, no one seemed to notice anything out of the ordinary. Why? Because they lived a life of extreme privacy. After retiring in 2004, Hackman completely withdrew from the spotlight, declining even rare interview opportunities. He and Arakawa embraced a quiet, private life, avoiding social media and seldom interacted with family or friends. Those who were close to them noted that Hackman had become more reclusive over time, even distancing himself from those nearest to him. Their neighbors, accustomed to their isolated lifestyle, never raised any alarms. With Hackman's estate nestled in a remote part of Santa Fe, his lack of public appearances didn't seem unusual, as he had kept this low-key lifestyle for years. The truth was first uncovered by a maintenance worker who was sent to check on the house after several days of unanswered calls. Upon entering the estate, he discovered that Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's world had fallen into an eerie silence. Betsy Arakawa was found to have contracted the H virus, a dangerous disease transmitted through the feces or urine of rodents. However, what puzzled investigators was the absence of any signs of rodents in the house. Hackman himself was not infected by the virus. If there had been a source of contamination, why was Arakawa the only one affected? Some speculated that she might have contracted the virus during a recent trip, but credit card records revealed that she hadn't left Santa Fe for months before her death. Could someone have brought the virus into the house? And if so, why? These questions remain unanswered, with the presence of the H virus adding another layer to the already complex mystery surrounding Betsy Arakawa's death. Gene Hackman is widely regarded as one of Hollywood's greatest actors, with a career that spanned over 4 decades and featured iconic films such as Unforgiven, The French Connection, Superman, and The Royal Tenenbaums. However, after his retirement, he almost completely vanished from the public eye. He stopped attending award ceremonies, avoided events, and severed ties with most of his old friends. The life of a man who once stood at the height of fame has now been reduced to an empty mansion and years of solitude in his final days. When Hackman passed away, there were no loved ones by his side, no grand memorial, no heartfelt tributes from colleagues, just a quiet house, an unsolved mystery, and a cinematic legacy that will live on forever. People will remember Gene Hackman as one of the greatest actors of all time, with 2 Oscars and dozens of classic films, or as a man who spent his final years in isolation, leaving the world with no one knowing what truly happened. The truth is that Hackman's story serves as a reminder of the fragility of life. No matter how brightly you shine, in the end, the most important thing is having someone by your side when the spotlight fades. For Gene Hackman, that light dimmed in an empty house, but his legacy will endure forever. The story of Gene Hackman and the secrets hidden beneath his mansion is sure to make you reflect. These strange discoveries not only uncover the darker corners of a Hollywood legend's life, but also raise unresolved questions full of mystery. What do you think about these secrets? Could they change the way we view Hackman and his private life? Thank you all for watching today's video. The revelations from Gene Hackman's neighbors have opened up an entirely new direction in the investigation, and we will definitely be keeping track of the latest developments. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any updates on this case. See you in the next videos, and always remember, the truth is out there waiting to be discovered. In a shocking twist, new revelations have emerged about the mysterious case of Gene Hackman's wife, Betsy. What was once believed to be a simple tragedy has now turned into an unsolved puzzle. A shocking phone call from Betsy just hours before her death, previously overlooked, has forced authorities to reconsider everything they thought they knew. Did Betsy live longer than originally reported? Who was behind that mysterious final phone call? And why did her husband, Hollywood legend Gene Hackman, remain silent about her death for an entire week? If you want to stay updated on the latest developments in this case, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any important information. Leave your comment below this video and let us know your thoughts on the suspicions surrounding Betsy Hackman's death. What do you think really happened? Join the conversation and share this video so everyone can uncover the truth behind this story. On February 12th, Betsy Arakawa, wife of Gene Hackman, was supposed to be unable to make a phone call, as she was believed to have passed away the day before. However, mobile records tell a completely different story. A call that shouldn't have happened was made, and a missed call appeared on the phone screen. But who answered it? Authorities have confirmed that the time of her death was completely reversed. If Betsy was alive that morning, what really happened next? A mix-up, a technical glitch, or a chilling secret hidden within Gene Hackman's home? If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more unsolved mysteries, make sure to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or theories on what really happened to Gene and Betsy Hackman. Do you think there's something hidden in this case? Join the conversation and let us know your opinion. And as always, don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. February 26th, 2025, Santa Fe, New Mexico. The passing of Hollywood star Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa Hackman, has shocked the media and fans worldwide. At first, everything seemed straightforward. Betsy was believed to have passed away on February 11th due to complications from a rare H-virus pneumonia syndrome. About a week later, Gene passed away, affected by heart issues and Alzheimer's. The story seemed to have ended until the Santa Fe County Police revealed a shocking truth. On February 12th, a day after Betsy was believed to have passed away, her phone made 3 calls to Cloudberry Health, a medical center in Santa Fe. Even stranger, later that afternoon, a missed call from Cloudberry Health appeared on her phone. Gene Hackman, a Hollywood legend and an irreplaceable icon of the silver screen, will forever be linked to his legendary roles in films like Unforgiven, The French Connection, and many other timeless works. Throughout the decades, he was admired not only for his exceptional acting talent, but also for his ability to maintain a private life, staying away from the frequent scandals of the entertainment industry. However, on a fateful day, the world was stunned by the sudden news of Gene Hackman and his wife's passing. What made the event even more mysterious was the information from the sheriff revealing Betsy Hackman's surprising final phone call. This call, made just before both of their deaths, raised many unanswered questions, making the situation even more perplexing and full of suspicion. A few days after this strange call was made public, Dr. Josiah Child, the director of Cloudberry Health, spoke out in an interview with the Daily Mail, adding to the shock. The doctor confirmed that Betsy had called his clinic on February 12th to schedule an appointment. Earlier, on February 10th, Betsy had canceled her appointment, saying that Gene wasn't feeling well, but on the morning of the 12th, she called back to reschedule. Dr. Child emphasized that Betsy showed no signs of the H virus, the cause believed to have led to her death. The strangest part was that Betsy never showed up for this appointment, and when Cloudberry Health called back in the afternoon, no one answered. When the forensic team entered the mansion after an unanswered delivery call, they were met with a scene that no one could forget. Everything was cold and neat. The dining table set for two glasses facing each other, with just a few drops of amber wine left on the table. There were no letters, books, or papers, only an old tape recorder sitting amidst a pile of white napkins. The device wasn't working, untouched by anyone, but it appeared as though it was a prop waiting to be discovered by the right person. When an investigator shakily powered the recorder on, everything remained silent. No sound, no recording. The memory card was empty, but an internal report later noted a strange detail: a single silver strand of hair at the bottom of the tape recorder. According to family stories, Gene stopped writing by hand when he turned 90 due to tremors. Instead, every night, he would turn on a tape recorder and share his thoughts, his jumbled memories of Hollywood and of Betsy. But then, one day, he stopped doing so. Betsy took the tape recorder and locked it in a safe in the bedroom, telling a close housekeeper, "This way is better." No one understood what she meant, and the house suddenly became eerily quiet. Some say that Leslie Hackman, Gene's daughter, admitted to having a copy of the recording, but her silence only fueled more rumors. Could the tape contain more than just a farewell? Could it reveal an accusation against Betsy, a secret pact, or even a desperate cry for help? Did the tape recorder truly exist? Or was it just a haunting phantom of the imagination for those left behind? The answer will forever remain a mystery. Although investigators found no tapes, they did notice something strange about the home where Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa passed away. The space didn't feel like a house that had just witnessed a tragedy. It resembled a cold Broadway stage instead. Every object, every chair, every family photo was arranged with unnerving precision, almost symmetrical, as if someone had carefully staged it all according to a script. Dim light filtered through the curtains, two glasses carefully placed on the dining table, facing each other. There was no sign of a sudden departure, but rather the backstage of a fateful play, where Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were the leading actors, and fate was the only audience. Of all the faces that appeared after the door to the house closed, Leslie Hackman haunted the public the most. She did not cry, beg, or offer any explanations. She simply left a single statement for the press. "My father was a storyteller, and even in his final moments, he told the story he wanted to tell." No recording, no cries for help, no horrifying truth buried beneath the glossy paint of the Santa Fe mansion. No one knows exactly what happened, and it is this silence that stands as the most chilling evidence. When the Hollywood lights faded, and the door to the mansion closed for good, people still wondered, what did Gene Hackman say on his final night? And more importantly, who was truly listening? There are moments in a person's life that pass so quietly that no one remembers them. But then there are moments that become legendary, not because they are loud, but because they completely vanish from the flow of reality. That's what people whisper about the eerie final weeks at Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's Santa Fe mansion. The neighbors in Santa Fe had grown accustomed to the couple's secluded lifestyle, but never had the house been so completely isolated. No mail, no deliveries, no one coming or going, not even the longtime servants. The iron gate at the foot of the hill was closed, the electronic lock always active, and the security cameras still pointed outward. But they revealed a chilling mystery. All the exterior cameras of the mansion ceased working exactly at 5:32 p.m. on February 14th. There were no signs of malfunction, no signs of tampering. They were simply disconnected, as if someone had pulled the plug, severing the house's connection to the outside world. And from that moment on, Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa gradually disappeared into the void. Information from the local pharmacy revealed a series of strange transactions in the 3 months leading up to the mansion's isolation. A large quantity of sedatives, painkillers, and strong sleeping pills had been repeatedly prescribed under Gene and Betsy's names, yet no one had ever seen them in person at the pharmacy. All orders were delivered to the mansion's gate, where the delivery person stated that they were never allowed inside. Notably, among the medications were prescriptions for end-stage cancer patients, those preparing for a one-way journey. However, Gene's medical records showed no signs of any serious illness, no cancer, no severe mental health issues. So, what were these medications for? When investigators broke into the house after a missing persons report, they faced a chilling paradox. The front door was locked from the inside, the old lock in perfect condition, with no signs of tampering. Everything inside the house, from the furniture to the family photos, remained still and undisturbed. A heavy, eerie feeling enveloped the space, as if the house had frozen in time, becoming a tomb for the past, holding on to secrets that no one could decipher. A book that Gene had been reading lay face down on the armchair beside a cold cup of tea, its surface covered by a thin layer of condensation. Clothes were neatly folded, but had not been worn. The fridge was stocked with food, but there was no sign of any cooking for weeks. The bedside lamp remained on day and night, yet the double bed seemed untouched. These eerie weeks were not just a time of disappearance, but a thin line between life and death. A place where people exist but do not truly live. A room on the second floor, where Betsy often practiced the piano, had completely changed. The piano and its stand were gone, replaced by a long table covered with a white cloth, neatly arranged with strange objects. A thick notebook listed Gene and Betsy's favorite songs, not to be listened to, but to be used in a ritual. A large medicine box was divided into compartments by time, containing powerful painkillers. 2 sealed envelopes with no names on them. Everything in the room resembled a small altar, where the owners had prepared for their own departure. Every detail, every breath, showed no sign of intrusion from the outside, no violence, no trace of a struggle. All the evidence pointed to only one possibility. Gene and Betsy had locked themselves in this house, carefully orchestrating a planned exit. But why? Why would a legend, someone who once proudly walked the red carpet, an immortal icon of the silver screen, choose to disappear quietly behind the cold stone walls? What made these two people, who had spent most of their lives together, choose to carry out this strange ritual of self-isolation? Were they running from something, or had they turned themselves into actors in their final play, a play with no audience, only absolute silence? The police revealed the final, unexpected phone call from Gene Hackman's wife, opening up a chilling mystery that had haunted Leslie Hackman for years. The strange weeks following Gene's death seemed to have never existed. All data was erased, every witness remained silent, and even Leslie, the only person Gene had called before the police broke down the door, stood quietly in an empty room, staring at the cold wall, uttering only one sentence. "They wrote the script. I couldn't change it." Those strange weeks would forever be locked away in darkness, where memory, fear, and truth merged together, waiting for someone brave enough to open the final door. Was it love, salvation, or just a gilded cage? That question had haunted Leslie Hackman ever since she stood on the porch of the Santa Fe mansion, watching the heavy wooden door close behind the forensic investigation team. Gene Hackman, the father who had once been a steadfast figure in Leslie's memory, was now just a shattered legacy. With every step she took into the final mystery, pieces of the past fell away from her, leading her into a story she had never fully understood for nearly 30 years. The police revealed the final, unexpected phone call from Gene Hackman's wife, shedding light on her hidden role behind the scenes. Betsy Arakawa, long portrayed by the media as a quiet and supportive wife, may not have just been a companion to Gene. As Leslie began to piece together the strange events of that fateful week, a different picture slowly emerged. Betsy wasn't just standing by her husband. She could very well have been the one controlling every aspect of Gene's life. Medical records from hospitals in Santa Fe and Gene's personal doctor revealed troubling details. Although Gene was still lucid enough to make decisions about his treatment, every prescription, from sleeping pills and sedatives to powerful painkillers, was written under Betsy's name. No prescription was ever directly requested by Gene. It was always Betsy who signed, picked up the medications, and held the key to the medicine cabinet. But the control didn't stop at medication. Betsy managed every aspect of Gene's daily routine, from a strictly calculated diet to limiting visitors and controlling who could see him. Betsy had influence over every decision, coordinating Gene's life with precision. This shocking discovery revealed a dark side to what seemed like their peaceful life, a life where Betsy appeared to hold all the power. Betsy Hackman seemed to have noticed something unusual about Gene's health as she became anxious and repeatedly asked about strange symptoms. The day before his death, on February 12th, Betsy called a doctor, but the call was abruptly cut off after 4 minutes and 32 seconds. She said, "I have to go," and hung up, leaving people wondering if something occurred that caused Betsy to suddenly end the call. The police discovered that before canceling the appointment on February 10th with the doctor, Betsy had purchased several types of heart support medication, mild sedatives, and a urine testing kit. This could suggest that she had been experimenting with something on Gene before deciding to cancel the appointment. But why did she cancel the appointment and then reschedule it for February 12th? Several theories have been proposed. Perhaps Betsy discovered a serious health issue with Gene, or maybe she uncovered a threat unrelated to Gene that could involve someone else. Things became even more mysterious when Betsy's call on February 12th was abruptly interrupted, and no one knows what she was hearing or witnessing before she hung up. Notably, Gene Hackman, who passed away a week later, did not mention Betsy's death throughout that week. This raises suspicions about whether he knew the truth about Betsy's death, or if he was involved in a secret he was too afraid to share. The strangeness surrounding Gene Hackman's death, with no clear signs of illness, and the fact that the police did not conduct an autopsy, only fueled further suspicion. It seemed as though the police hastily closed the investigation, with numerous irregularities in the records and related phone calls. After Betsy was confirmed to have passed away, no one questioned the idea of an elderly woman quietly passing in peace. But then things started to change. Call logs, medical records, statements from doctors, and strange phone calls suggested that Betsy may not have died on February 11th, as previously thought. If that's the case, all the previous assumptions were wrong. What's even stranger is that Gene Hackman died exactly 1 week later. People say it was due to old age and declining health. But could it really be that simple? Or was this part of a carefully orchestrated plan? Sheriff Nathan Caldwell surprised everyone when he made an official announcement stating that after reviewing new evidence, they had to adjust the timeline. "We cannot confirm that Betsy Hackman passed away on February 11th, he said. This caused a public uproar. If Betsy didn't die on February 11th, why was there no sight or sound of her after that? This led people to question whether Gene knew the truth. The strangest thing is that every answer points to one truth. Something happened between February 11th and 18th that no one wants to face. Gene Hackman died a week after Betsy, and people say it was due to old age and declining health, but a closer look reveals some strange signs. Gene's autopsy report showed no clear cause of death, with no signs of major illness, stroke, or heart failure. There was nothing indicating he had serious issues before his passing. Could it be a strange coincidence, or a secret buried deep? Did Gene know something about Betsy's death, and did that cause his downfall? Or was someone forcing him to remain silent about some truth? The bizarre part is how the police handled the case, with red flags such as Betsy's phone data still active after she was supposedly dead, the missed call from Cloudberry on the afternoon of February 12th, and Dr. Child confirming that Betsy lived beyond February 11th. Gene's death a week later with no clear cause raised major questions, but all of that was quickly buried. The autopsy records were sealed. No official conclusion was made, no autopsy was performed, and the case files were locked away from the press. This isn't normal, and it suggests that something much larger is being hidden. Everything seems too perfect to be just a coincidence. Betsy was supposedly dead on February 11th, but phone data and calls from Cloudberry prove she lived until February 12th. Gene lived another week without mentioning Betsy or taking any actions related to her loss. Then he mysteriously passed away with no clear cause. The police adjusted the timeline but didn't provide a satisfactory explanation. The case files were quickly cleaned up, leaving no trace to follow. This wasn't a stroke of luck. It's an untold story. One thing is certain. Gene and Betsy Hackman knew something, but now both are gone, leaving the truth undisclosed. The most terrifying part is that someone ensured this truth would remain buried forever. Every clue was wiped clean, all the witnesses disappeared, and the police closed the case files. Yet there are still too many unanswered questions. The story of Gene and Betsy Hackman ends in silence. Was it a natural death, or a silence deliberately created? While the public may eventually forget, those who care know that this is not the end. The truth may still be hiding somewhere, and if anyone seeks it, will they survive to tell the tale? This is just a hypothesis, a story pieced together from the strange fragments of the Gene and Betsy Hackman case. Perhaps everything is just a coincidence, or maybe there is a bigger truth being concealed. Thank you for watching today's video. The story of Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy is not just a case, but a mystery yet to be unraveled. The unexpected twists and unanswered questions continue to make people ponder. Will the truth behind these events ever be revealed? If you want to explore more mysterious stories and fascinating truths with us, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue to search for the unknown. In a quiet room, a tear-soaked piece of paper was suddenly discovered, and it was not just a simple will. The FBI was completely taken aback when they deciphered the final trembling words of Gene Hackman. Could this be a horrifying secret buried for years, a sincere confession, or just a desperate cry for help that no one noticed? When the Hackman family read those words, they collapsed on the spot. The deaths of Gene and Betsy were far from as simple as everyone thought. An unresolved mystery, an unforgettable case. So, what did they write in their final moments? Let's uncover the untold story. If you're curious to uncover the details never revealed about the case, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos. Share your thoughts in the comments and join us on the journey to uncover the truth. To G. Damn Nook Mat. A tear-soaked piece of paper was found in the bedroom, and it wasn't just a will. The FBI was left speechless as they decoded the final trembling words of Gene Hackman. Was this a horrifying truth buried for years? A heartfelt confession, or a desperate cry for help that no one noticed? When the family read its contents, they collapsed right there. The deaths of Gene and Betsy were not as simple as everyone thought. A haunting mystery, an unsolved case. So, what exactly did they write in their final moments? The villa stretched across the vast landscape of Santa Fe, New Mexico, once a testament to the joyful days of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. But on a gloomy afternoon at the end of February, it became the setting of a heartbreaking story. Two souls bound together for over 3 decades were found in separate corners of their vast home, one in the bathroom, the other near the kitchen, just steps apart, yet separated by an eternal boundary. The public was stunned when the news of Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa's passing spread. No one could comprehend it. One of the greatest cinematic legends of the 20th century had ended his life in such profound loneliness. Betsy Arakawa, the woman who stood by Gene for over 30 years, always with a gentle smile and warm eyes, was found first, lying on the bathroom floor. Scattered beside her were thyroid pills, her head resting against a running fireplace. Pulmonary fur syndrome, a virus linked to rodents, was confirmed as the official cause. This revelation raised many eyebrows. How could a luxurious mansion harbor traces of rodents? But Gene Hackman might not have even known that his beloved wife had passed away. Doctors reported that the veteran actor was in the late stages of Alzheimer's disease, meaning his memory had deteriorated significantly. Without Betsy to care for him, he may have been unable to take care of himself in the days that followed. It's believed that Gene wandered through the vast 9,000-square-foot villa, surrounded by familiar walls, but now feeling alien to him. That's why on February 18th, when Gene Hackman's heart stopped beating, no one was there to witness it. All that was known was that a week after he was found, he was still wearing his signature sunglasses, with his cane resting beside him. The villa was not only the home of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, but also a treasure trove of their shared memories. Set on a vast estate, it served as their peaceful retreat in the final years of their lives, far from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. Gene, the iconic Lex Luthor in Superman, hadn't appeared on screen since 2004. Instead, he turned to painting, writing novels, and enjoying quiet days with Betsy. The villa reflected their passion for the arts, with a dedicated piano room for Betsy and a painting studio for Gene. But when the police arrived on February 26th, the scene was no longer a haven of creativity and art. It had transformed into a space shrouded in cold silence. In the bathroom, where Betsy was found, the fireplace kept the air warm, but the gloominess sent chills down the spines of those near the kitchen area. Gene Hackman lay under the dim light, a sight no one wished to witness. One of their beloved dogs, Xena, was also found dead, while two other bears and Nikita wandered aimlessly around the estate. What confused the investigators the most, however, was there were no signs of forced entry or struggle. No theft, no evidence of a fight, just an eerily quiet space, an unfinished story, and too many unanswered questions. There's a saying that the mind is the most terrifying thing to lose. When it comes to Alzheimer's, there's nothing more heartbreaking than watching someone slowly lose their own memories. Gene Hackman, a sharp actor who brought depth to countless roles, gradually lost himself in his final years. The disease not only stole his memories, but also took away his ability to care for himself without Betsy. He may have searched for her in vain, adrift in his own home. The forensic reports show no evidence that Gene had eaten for days before being found. A shocking detail highlights his complete isolation, with no one to help him. The biggest question now is, if Gene Hackman didn't have Alzheimer's, would things have turned out differently? Did he realize that Betsy had passed away? Could he have called for help? Could this tragedy have been avoided if someone had been there with him in his final days? It's heartbreaking to think that one of Hollywood's brightest stars faced his end this way, not surrounded by fans or on a dazzling stage, but in a vast house where the laughter that once echoed was now swallowed by silence. The story of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa is not just a personal tragedy, but also a wake-up call for families facing Alzheimer's. It's a reminder that sometimes what possesses a person is not time, but loneliness. On February 27th, when FBI agents entered the master bedroom of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's estate, they had no idea they were about to uncover a document that could rewrite the fate of a legendary Hollywood mansion. A walnut wood desk sat neatly by the window, basking in the faint sunlight of Santa Fe, with old, worn pages resting on top, including a will. An unexpected discovery lay there, as if someone had purposely placed it on a preordained day. The real shock wasn't the existence of the will, but its contents, a significant shift in how Hackman intended to distribute his assets. From the opening lines, it was clear Gene Hackman had carefully considered his legacy. As one of the finest actors of the 20th century, he had amassed a staggering $80 million fortune, including film royalties, real estate, stocks, and bank accounts. But what caused controversy wasn't the amount of money. It was how he chose to distribute it. In the will signed 4 months earlier, Gene Hackman made a stunning change from his original plan. Betsy Arakawa was named his primary heir, granted control over all of his real estate and investments. His two daughters from his first marriage to Faye Malty, Elizabeth and Leslie, were listed as secondary heirs in the event that Betsy passed away before Gene. The estate would then be divided among the daughters according to specific terms. However, the 7-day gap between their deaths complicated matters. Under New Mexico law, if heirs pass away within 120 hours, 5 days of each other, the estate may follow a different rule. Gene and Betsy's deaths were separated by exactly 7 days, just 2 days beyond that limit, which could significantly impact how their assets are handled. Now, the urgent question is, who truly inherits this estate? New Mexico's inheritance law contains an important clause. If someone passes away without a valid will or the heir survives beyond 120 hours, the situation will change. The estate could be divided according to state law, meaning if Gene and Betsy had died within 120 hours of each other, their assets might have been more equally distributed among the parties involved. However, with the 7-day gap, legally, Gene outlived Betsy, maintaining control over the inheritance since Betsy was no longer alive to claim her share. The secondary terms of the will came into effect, and his 2 daughters would inherit everything. This could explain why the FBI and the family lawyer focused on the timing between the deaths. If there were any signs that Gene had died less than 7 days after Betsy, the outcome could be completely reversed. Another important question is whether Gene Hackman was truly aware of time and events in his final days. If he was still conscious, it would mean he knew his wife had passed and was fully aware of what was about to happen. This could completely reshape how people view the deaths of the couple. The immense fortune Gene Hackman left behind wasn't just in cash or property, but also in the historical value of his films. Movies like The French Connection, Unforgiven, Superman, and Royal Tenenbaums solidified his status as a legend in Hollywood, continuing to generate millions of dollars each year. With the new will, his daughters are almost certain to inherit everything. However, that doesn't mean everything will go smoothly. When the FBI revealed the will, a legal storm erupted. Betsy Arakawa might have a separate will. If so, her assets could be directed elsewhere. Lawyers could argue that the 7-day gap is unfair, pushing the court to redistribute the assets differently. Charitable and arts organizations that Gene and Betsy had generously donated to might claim a portion if they can prove the couple intended to support the community with the vast fortune now at risk. No one can predict a simple resolution. One lingering question remains unanswered. Does this truly reflect Gene Hackman's final wishes? Or was something else at play in his last days? This document could either unravel the mystery or spark a legal battle lasting years. In either case, just a 7-day difference has upended how Gene Hackman's legacy is shared, and perhaps how he will be remembered. The bedroom will redefine how the era of Gene Hackman and Betsy is viewed. The estate will be divided, but it only raises more questions than answers. Why did Gene outlive his wife by exactly 7 days? If he had severe Alzheimer's, could he even comprehend what was happening? And if not, why does the timing between their deaths seem too precise to be a coincidence? The story grows more mysterious as the FBI discovered 2 phones at the scene, potentially the key to uncovering what really happened. But another clue, perhaps the earliest warning sign of the tragedy, is the mysterious death of a dog in the estate. Too many things don't add up, and once these pieces start to fit together, the truth behind it will slowly be revealed. If you find the story of Gene Hackman's death intriguing and captivating, leave a comment with the number 1. If not, comment with the number 0. Now, let's dive into the next developments of the story. The deaths of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa may be very different from what the public knows. According to the FBI report, Betsy Arakawa passed away on February 20th, and Gene Hackman on February 27th, exactly 7 days apart, a number so strange it's hard to believe. If Gene was indeed in the late stages of Alzheimer's, as family sources confirm his severe memory loss, he may not have been aware of time or events. This points to two troubling possibilities. First, if he didn't know his wife had passed away, why did he survive exactly 7 days after her? What made this timing so eerily perfect? This raises many questions about the strange coincidence in the gap between their deaths. Second, if he had sensed Betsy's passing, how could someone with Alzheimer's make conscious decisions in his final days? Medical reports indicate that in the 7 days following Betsy's death, Gene never left the estate, didn't make any calls, or show any signs of seeking help. So what did he do during those 7 days? Who was the last person to see him alive? An investigator told the press that no food was missing from the kitchen, and there were no signs that Hackman had cooked or ordered food. So how did he survive? Who helped him during his final days? This question becomes even more pressing as the FBI seized 2 phones from the scene, one from the bedroom and one from Gene's office. The first phone, belonging to Betsy Arakawa, was found on the bedside table, undisturbed during the search. Her last message was written on February 19th, 1 day before her death, and was never sent. She wrote, "We need to talk about this. The situation is getting worse. I don't know if I can handle it anymore." But it was never sent. A silent cry for help, unseen by anyone. The second phone, belonging to Gene Hackman, held an even more troubling detail. FBI data revealed that at 11:42 a.m. on February 21st, 1 day after Betsy's death, he received a call from an unknown number. The call lasted 2 minutes and 17 seconds, with no recorded message or follow-up. Who called Gene Hackman, and what was said? Just 1 day after that call, Gene turned off the phone and never turned it on again. This means someone contacted him right after his wife's death. But what did they say? How did it impact his final days? In the $8 million estate, besides the bodies of Gene and Betsy, another life was lost. Their beloved dog, found dead in its crate. The 6-year-old brown Labrador retriever, healthy with no prior illnesses, died around the same time as Betsy and Gene. A preliminary veterinary report found no signs of injury or violence, indicating it wasn't harmed in an obvious way, but its body was severely dehydrated, suggesting it hadn't eaten or drunk for several days. 2 possibilities arise. Gene was too disoriented to care for the dog in his final 7 days, or someone else in the estate deliberately neglected it. What deepens the mystery is the rare decision by the FBI to conduct an autopsy on the dog, a step they rarely take in typical cases. They suspect the dog may have been poisoned. If so, by whom and why? A will that changes a state's division of assets, 2 deaths exactly 7 days apart, an unsent message, a 2-minute 17-second call from an unknown number, and a dog mysteriously found dead in its crate. All of these details point to one big question. What really happened in the final 7 days of Gene Hackman's life? The answer could overturn all initial assumptions. The mysterious will found in Gene Hackman's bedroom was not just a lifeless document. It could be the spark for a fierce legal battle. Though Hackman was a giant of Hollywood with a career spanning decades, in his final days, he was no longer the steel man of the screen. Alzheimer's had clouded his mind, often leaving him unable to recall dates or loved ones. This raises important questions. Did Hackman truly update his will recently? If so, was Alzheimer's a factor in that decision? Who were the unexpected heirs named in the will? Would anyone challenge its legality? These uncertainties placed Hackman's attorney in a difficult position, potentially reshaping how his estate was distributed and sparking an ongoing legal battle among those involved. When the will was made public, the FBI launched an official investigation, noting signs that the will had been amended just months before Hackman's death. The obstacle lies in his health. Medical reports confirm that Hackman was diagnosed with Alzheimer's more than 3 years ago, and by the final months of his life, his memory had severely declined, making it impossible for him to manage finances or make major decisions. So how could he have legally amended his will? Updating a will requires mental clarity, sound judgment, and an understanding of the implications. For someone with late-stage Alzheimer's like Hackman, this was nearly impossible. This detail is crucial. If his attorney cannot prove Hackman had the capacity to amend the will, it could be deemed invalid. Before this will was revealed, most people assumed Hackman's estate would go to his daughters from his previous marriage. But when the document was made public, a shocking twist emerged. Who were the new names among the heirs? According to an insider source, at least 3 surprising names were listed. A mysterious caregiver, a woman in her 40s whose name remains unknown, with a significant sum of money assigned to her. Initial reports suggest she may have cared for Hackman in his final years, but her identity and the nature of their relationship remain unclear. A surprising charity was left a portion of Hackman's estate for a little-known nonprofit. Strange because he had never publicly supported this organization before. A long-deceased friend, a former colleague who hadn't been in contact with Hackman for over a decade, was also assigned a substantial sum. These names raise an important question. Do they reflect Hackman's true wishes, or has someone altered the will for personal gain? With a will that could potentially have been altered and suspicious circumstances surrounding it, a legal battle seems inevitable. Who will join Hackman's daughters? They might seek to have the court review the will, arguing that their father lacked the capacity to amend it. If they win, the old will would take effect, granting them everything. The mysterious caregiver, if named, could fight to keep her portion. But the key issue is whether she influenced the will's amendment. The charity Hackman may have willingly donated to, though there is no solid evidence, could raise questions. Their claims could also unsettle the sudden appearance of his old friend. The inclusion of new names in Hackman's will raises suspicions of outside interference. Is there evidence that Hackman agreed to these changes? If not, the will could be declared invalid, and his estate would be divided according to state law. This turns the original will, which seemed like a simple legal document, into a ticking time bomb that threatens to tear Hackman's family apart. Could a man with Alzheimer's make wise changes to his wishes? A secret caregiver, a strange charity, a long-lost friend. Are they involved in the changes to the will? What other secrets could this legal confrontation uncover? The answer remains elusive, but one thing is certain. Gene Hackman's death not only left behind sorrow, but also sparked an endless battle over his legacy. When the media first reported on the deaths of John Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, the public viewed it as a heartbreaking tragedy, a man passing and the other succumbing to loneliness and failing health. But days later, the Santa Fe police issued a statement that turned the story on its head. The case remains open, with unresolved details still needing further investigation. This signals a harsh truth. The deaths of this couple are not as simple as they appear. If the cause was natural, why couldn't the police close the case? Why did the FBI seize Hackman's 2 phones? What are they searching for? What secrets lie within the bedroom documents? The anomalies in Hackman's finances, are they connected to the case? Each question is an unresolved gap. The deeper the investigation goes, the more unstable it becomes. Usually, a death from illness wouldn't warrant strong FBI involvement, yet they kept Hackman's phones, a modern iPhone and an old flip phone. This sparks speculation. An insider source revealed that the FBI was combing through call logs, messages, and search histories from Hackman's final days, hinting at suspicious contacts or attempts to reach him during that time. An anonymous investigator told the press, "We're analyzing the last digital footprints left. There are gaps in the timeline that don't add up, suggesting that crucial moments in Hackman's final days remain unexplained." Along with a document from his bedroom, possibly a revised will or a letter revealing his final thoughts, still remains shrouded in secrecy. If this was just age and illness, why conceal its contents? The case continues to linger because so much remains unclear, so many uncertainties. This includes someone who was present at the time. The police found no signs of forced entry or strangers on the property, but investigators wonder if someone visited. The security cameras, unnoticed at the front gate, only captured Hackman and Betsy before their deaths. But the system only covered part of the sprawling 12-acre estate. Some FBI agents are investigating whether someone may have entered from the back, which wasn't under surveillance. A criminal investigator noted, "There are many ways to access that property without being detected by security." This raises a major suspicion. Did Hackman meet someone in his final days that no one knew about? 2 suspicious financial moves are another focus of the FBI's investigation. Recent financial records show that in the 6 months before his death, Hackman withdrew a large sum, including a withdrawal of over $250,000 just weeks prior. 2 pressing questions. Who received that money? Was someone pressuring Hackman into these transactions? A real estate lawyer commented, "In cases like this, financial transactions can reveal hidden relationships or pressures that no one can clearly see." It's clear that with so many unresolved issues, the Hackman case still holds many uncertainties as the police dig deeper into data and evidence. The ultimate question remains: who was behind this tragedy? A criminal expert said in an interview, "This story has more layers than we see." The question isn't just why Gene Hackman and Betsy died, but what really happened in that lavish estate during their final days. The police haven't closed the case, and perhaps the truth is still waiting for its moment. Gene Hackman, a monumental figure in Hollywood cinema, a name forever tied to timeless roles, is now remembered in a story shrouded in darkness. From an unshakable icon, he departed in isolation, surrounded by unanswered mysteries. His cinematic legacy is untouchable, but the circumstances of his final days remain a mystery. Fans still remember Hackman on screen. Decisive, bold, commanding. Few know that in his later years, he gradually lost himself. Alzheimer's not only erased his memories, but also stripped him of the independence he once cherished. His final days may have been filled with confusion, blurring reality and recollection. Hackman died just 7 days after his wife, Betsy Arakawa, passed away, deepening the enigma. Was it pure coincidence, or is there still something hidden? Did he know something or do something that he no longer remembered? When the FBI announced that the case was still unresolved, it became clear that this story wasn't over. The will found in Hackman's bedroom sparked a series of suspicions. What was in it? Who was the real heir? It may have caused the tragedy at Hackman's estate. According to New Mexico law, if Hackman and his wife died within 120 hours, 5 days of each other, an administrative unit of the state would change the distribution of the estate. But Hackman passed away 7 days later, a gap that altered the way his $80 million fortune was divided. The timing of his death raises questions about who the true beneficiaries of his estate are. What needs to be clarified is whether the will was recently updated. If so, who helped Hackman draft it? Was he mentally sound enough to make decisions? Did Alzheimer's make his choices more vulnerable to influence? Who is the official heir? His daughters may claim the majority of the estate, but are there any unexpected names in the will? A friend? A caregiver? A charity? Could anyone challenge its legality? If contested, a lawsuit could drag on for years. The public is awaiting the investigation, one that could either uncover everything or spark even more controversy. With everything that's been revealed, one important question remains. What is the real truth? Why did Hackman survive exactly 7 days after his wife's death? Are his strange financial moves in the past 6 months related? Why is the FBI still holding on to his phones and records if this was natural? Some police sources hint that the case might soon be closed without charges, but that doesn't mean the story has truly ended. When the bills are revealed, when the FBI and police share their final reports, will the public accept this as a natural tragedy, or will mysteries still linger? Some cases never truly close. They just fade into uncertainty. Gene Hackman left behind an enormous cinematic legacy, but the final days of his life remain a mystery that captivates the world. Whether the truth is exposed or not, he will forever be a legend. If you find this case full of surprises and unresolved mysteries, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated on the next thrilling investigations.